All right. Well, thank you very much for having me do a follow-up, and thanks to all of you for attending the original Intro to Screen Reader, and also for joining me for the Q&A session. Definitely feel free to post any questions. If I don't have an answer, I'll be honest about that, but hopefully this will be a good opportunity for you to get any answers that I do have. And I'm also on Twitter and everywhere else, so we can certainly keep the conversation going. I also want to thank all of those who have reached out to me via email over the past few weeks. I'm sorry if I haven't gotten back to everyone. I am working on it and definitely appreciate all the positive comments and all the other feedback that I've received from all of you. So thank you very much.
So we have a question here, Steve. How does a deafblind user read the website if the user cannot hear the screen reader?
That's a great question. Let me turn on my video and I can show you possibly. So there is a device called a Braille display. And what a Braille display does is, I have one here wrapped in bubble wrap. And it's a little device that looks like this. Can you see that, Laura?
Yep, that's great.
And for those that can't, it's a rectangular device. On the front of it are the Perkins style keyboard layout. In the middle is a round navigation pad, and at the bottom is a tray of little rectangles through which pins will poke up. They're magnetically controlled, and they will create Braille on the screen. So I don't know if you'll see this or not, but if I turn it on, and I hope that it's charged, what will happen is that the Braille display will create Braille characters for whatever the screen reader would otherwise be saying. So the Braille display will connect, of course it's not turning on now, the Braille display will connect to the screen reader, and the output will be represented in Braille rather than represented in speech. Now, someone who is deafblind will be able to follow along with the Braille that's on the display. They read across the Braille, and then when they push the button to go to the next line or the next group of characters, the dots will rearrange themselves in a format that that they'll be able to read in Braille. So it refreshes, essentially, is what happens there. Let me show you on another one that might not be so dead. The one thing I want to comment, though, about is that even for folks who are not deafblind, so here we have a different display that is actually charged, and I don't know if you can see these dots. These might be too tiny, but there's dots here so I can read across, and then when I push a button, the dots will rearrange themselves to go through the different, I'm just going through a menu. So I don't know if that shows up on the video, but the dots will rearrange themselves based on what's displaying on the screen or what the screen reader would be speaking. The other nice thing about Braille displays are that I'm reading this instead of hearing it, so that if I'm reading something, I'm getting the spelling, for example, whereas a screen reader by default will just be speaking the words. I can make it spell things out if I want to, but when I read it in Braille, I'm getting that by default. And so that's very powerful as well. So a Braille display is the technology that's used. Not exclusively by folks who are deafblind, but certainly it's a way to get the output in a more accessible format from the screen reader. We're still using the screen reader, though, in the mix to get the information from the screen to the Braille display rather than the speech.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Got another one here for you. Is there a limitation to the number of characters of alt text a screen reader will read? We have heard that screen readers will ignore anything beyond 125 to 150 characters of alt text.
Yeah, I'm going to say I don't know that, but I don't think the limit is a hard-coded limit anymore. I think this was, and I could be wrong here, but I believe this was more of a best practice type thing. I don't think this was a hard-coded limit unless it was a while ago in certain screen readers, but um, I don't believe that you're restricted to that. The thing I would keep in mind, though, is that's a lot of characters, right? That's a really long description for an image, and the user may not want the image described at all. So if your alt is that long, you may want to consider how in depth you're going into the description and whether that makes sense. So for example, if I'm reading a catalog, let's say, and there's product images, I might be wanting to focus on the moving from product to product. If I'm needing to wait for the screen reader to read a very, 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 very lengthy description of an image, in some ways that could be more distracting because I want to move to the next one. I already know I don't want this one. I want to see the next product, but yet I'm having to listen to this well-written, very verbose description of an image that I don't have any interest in at all. So I don't think there's a limit anymore, but I would be cautious as you approach that. I would almost suggest pretending there's a limit, if only because at that point you start balancing the usefulness of the actual alt attribute against the ability or the efficiency that someone could have navigating the actual web page.
Great, thanks for that. Another really good question here. When working with footnotes and endnotes in a document, PDF, is it better for a screen reader to read the notes immediately after the in-text reference or at the very end?
Great question. I'm going to preface this by saying it's personal preference. For me, I would prefer to have them at the end. And the reason is because I want to focus on what it is I'm actually reading. If those footnotes are read in context, while that is kind of nice, I may not be as interested in the footnotes as I am in the material. Now, that does mean I might have to use my screen reader's review commands to possibly reference a footnote on occasion, but I would rather do that when I need to versus being forced to listen to footnotes when I don't need to. This also, while slightly different, also applies to things where, let's say you have a list of features, and next to some of the features are 1 star, and next to some of the other ones are 2 stars, and then at the bottom there's a note that says 2 stars require this phone or whatever, and 1 star requires this software version or this phone, right? So they denote with 1 or 2 stars that you have to have this pricing plan or this phone or this coverage or whatever it is, right? And so it's a little confusing because you have to reference that to understand what the 1 and 2 star denotation means, but it would be way more confusing for me at least, and I should underline this, for me to hear that each and every time, because I may not care necessarily about that feature at all. So I don't necessarily care which phone it's relevant for or what the plan is for. So I would keep them at the end. This also would mimic more what everyone else experiences. So if I were talking to someone else about whatever it is I'm reading, I wouldn't say something foolish like, oh, you can tell because the note is right after this text, right? It's really not after this text. So knowing that it's at the end, I can say more intelligently to someone, oh, I could tell by this particular footnote, that references that text, and it would be more accurate.
Great, thanks, Steve. We just had a quick question asking this will be available on demand. It will. We will be sure to send it out to those who registered and also have it available on our on-demand page. So again, for those who maybe just joined us, go ahead and type your questions into either the Q&A box or the chat box. We're just kind of answering questions on the fly. I think we just had another one come in, Steve. Does technology always work better for the blind? If not, what are the workarounds?
Does technology always work better? Um,
It's a bit vague.
yeah, I'm not sure maybe they could provide context.
Yeah, if there's any specific technologies that you're referring to, that would be helpful. Thanks. And then,
While we're waiting for that, I will say that, I'm a huge fan of OneNote. Some of you may have seen I did a video with Microsoft about OneNote and how I used it during a medical crisis this past year. And so I love apps like OneNote for taking notes. That said, though, I do still have a Braille writer that I use with paper. Sometimes technology is fantastic. Huge proponent of technology, of course, but sometimes, paper and a Braille writer or, lower tech solutions do work best. Sometimes it's, technology can um, be overcomplicated. I still will use, for example, Braille labels on doors if I need to label a room number or something if it's not done. You could take a more high-tech solution and use some sort of, QR tag or beacon thing or, any of this new technology that's out there, and that's really awesome. But sticking a Braille label on it, um, I can buy label tape from 3M. The labeler is $30 or whatever it is. It's a low tech and yet very effective solution for me and for others that would read Braille. So that's a broad answer, but sometimes the technology solution is the most high tech, but not the most efficient or effective solution.
that makes sense. And they clarified saying by smartphone or by computer. So I guess the question could really be, what are the technologies you like most when you're on your smartphone or most when you're on your computer? And then maybe you could even touch on the difference of experiences between the two technologies.
Yeah, I think, and this is probably a very pessimistic way to look at this, but both have the ability to break. I love my smartphone because it's portable. It's always with me. I have an iPhone and an Android. I find for me that the iPhone gives me access to more applications than with Android. But that said, I have plenty of uh, Android brethren who absolutely love the platform and have been able to accomplish all that they can, all that I can with iOS on the Android side of things. So again, it comes down in a way to personal preference. And that's kind of exciting for me that this becomes a personal preference issue versus I have to use an iPhone because it's the only thing I can use, right? So I can actually make a choice as a consumer about which I want to go with. And that's a really empowering thing. No longer do I have to choose specific hardware because that's the only thing that has to be accessible. Um, the iPhone gives me the advantage that everything is very portable, whereas the laptop, it's an extra bigger thing to carry, or a desktop, I have to, be at my desk. So I love the portability factor of the iPhone. And so I tend to favor smartphones slash tablet stuff, if only because it's very, very portable. But that said, laptops have extremely long battery lives now, and so that's not really a huge differentiator anymore. I guess I'm just too attached to my iPhone, maybe.
I think we all are.
It's never more than 3 feet away. I can't imagine why anyone would have their phone more than 3 feet away. The horror of it.
So we have another good question here. It says, what happens when a screen reader encounters a pop-up window, specifically in HTML pop-up?
That's a great question because it's a great problem. And I mean great not in that a good, but great in the large. So what should happen is when you have a modal, the focus should be directed to that modal for both keyboard and screen reader. And you can provide an alert for the screen reader user that the pop-up has activated, or that I think the way Amazon does it, which is kind of neat, is they'll say an overlay is being displayed. And they use ARIA to convey that. For those that want to see how Amazon's done it, the pop-up for the Amazon Smile thing shows up and it says an overlay is being displayed, which doesn't show visually, but is spoken to the screen reader, and the focus is set to that overlay. And we have lots of other examples as well on how to do this. The problem is if you don't set focus programmatically to the overlay or in any other way notify the screen reader user that something has changed, it's a problem because they may not be aware that the overlay is there. And if the info is inserted at the end of the DOM, they're not going to encounter it until they read through the whole web page. So here's where this comes into being a problem. I'll fill out a form to order something from somewhere, and I have one of these zip codes that is like, I live in a suburb of Minneapolis called Richfield, but sometimes my zip code comes up as Minneapolis, sometimes it comes up as Richfield. It's just one of those things, right? So I fill in my street address and my city, my state, my zip code, and I submit it, and nothing seems to happen. And so I go double check and I hit submit, and everything looks fine to me. I don't understand what the trouble is, and I hit submit. What's happened is an overlay has shown up asking me to verify that my address is correct. Like it wants to match, and it says, are you sure you didn't mean Minneapolis? And it's that modal where you choose the right address. But because there's no notification that anything happened, I don't think anything has happened. I don't realize that it's waiting for me to make what should be a very easy choice. I just keep wondering why my form didn't submit. So modals and pop-ups are certainly fine, but you do need to, via programmatic focus or through ARIA alerts, indicate to the user, hey, something has happened. Another area this comes up is chats. I mean, we've all been on sites where all of a sudden this thing will pop up and it'll be like, hi, my name is Tom, and I'm, is there any way I can help you shop for this product? And often those don't read. And when those don't read, I keep trying to shop and I don't realize I have to dismiss the chat thing and, get Tom out of the way. Sorry, Tom's out there, but I have to get Tom out of the way so I can keep shopping, right? Because until I do, that chat thing is going to be front and center. But if I'm not notified about it, I don't know that it's there, and I just get frustrated because I can't continue my shopping process. So it's totally fine, but you have to be proactive about programmatic focus and ARIA roles.
Great answer, Steve. Thanks for that. Got another question here. They're curious what you do in situations where you don't know what's happening on the screen. Do you have to ask someone for help? What's your go-to to troubleshoot that kind of situation where something is inaccessible?
Well, I do a couple of things. I mean, I'm curious by nature, and so I try to read through the whole screen. There's a couple of things that tend to be always problematic. So, for example, one of the things I'll do is I'll go to the bottom of the screen, past all the copyright, click here for the privacy policy stuff that is usually in the footer, because oftentimes when there's a modal or some other thing happening, it's injected at the end of the DOM. It's bad practice, but it's what it is. So I will go to the end of the DOM beyond the footer and copyright stuff just to see if anything's there. And sometimes I'll encounter the modal, or I'll encounter some error message that visually is positioned in the right place on the screen, but in the DOM is in the wrong place. So I always tend to go to the bottom and just see what I'm missing, because that is traditionally a problem. The other thing I try to do is read the form fields. If a form doesn't have labels on its fields, I try to read the surrounding text and guess what those labels should be based on the surrounding text. And maybe it's wrong, but if I can guess correctly, I might be able to proceed. If there are buttons on the screen that aren't labeled, sometimes it's hit and miss, and that can either be good or really bad, in that I've had situations where I've hit submit and have been able to check out of somewhere, and I've had situations where I've thought I was possibly hitting submit. I had a 50-50 shot, and what I actually hit was empty cart. And then I have to go back through and do the whole darn thing again and remember that it's the other unlabeled button this time, which is, hugely frustrating. Finally, there are times when I just need help. I recently was doing something online that required me to sign a document using my mouse. So this is totally a visual, use your touchpad thing to write the signature. And of course, the box where you write that or do that isn't labeled. So I had to use FaceTime and just call someone and say, hey, listen, I need you to look at this screen, help me to do this, right? Or just help me with what's going on. FaceTime is great for that. Sometimes, an app like this where I can screen share is super handy. There are services out there that assist the blind in doing this. There's a service called Aira, AIRA .io, which is a paid service where someone who's blind can get assistance with a task through video. That's one recent solution. It is a costly solution, which is a challenge for many folks. Good old-fashioned FaceTime, Skype, Hangouts, anything that can share a screen is also very handy. The problem, though, comes in when it's personal information, right? If the form I'm filling out has to do with my payroll deductions, right? I may not want to. I may have a really good close friend, guy I have beers with every Friday, but I don't necessarily want him looking at my 401k form or my, tax return or something like that, right? So while it's an option, there's often privacy concerns around, whether or not it's okay to share that information with someone, no matter how close of a friend or family member they might be.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Steve. Looks like we have about 5 minutes left. I'm not seeing any questions right now, so it might be a good time if you want to just kind of talk. Oh, never mind. We had one just come in. So this question asks, what would you say to web designers about designing better web pages? Like what are tips you have for them so that the screen reader can read the page better?
I would say know your for designers. Okay, so just
web designers. So
web designers, yeah. So I would say, be mindful about where things are in the DOM. Understand how to use ARIA because it's a technology that can be really good or really bad. I often think of ARIA as like a scalpel. You can use it to do good and you can use it to do bad. It depends how you use the tool. So understanding it is really key. Understand that you're going for an experience, that really what you're building here is the ability for a screen reader user to have the same experience as everyone else is able to have. So what does that experience look like or indeed sound like, right? Understand what that is, and that might mean doing many of the things you would ordinarily do, like talking to actual screen reader users. It seems like a strange concept, but there is an increase now of more organizations doing usability studies with people who have disabilities, not necessarily just screen reader users, but across the board, to really understand, it's one thing to meet WCAG 2.0 and now the new 2.1 and to be compliant with this and compliant with that. But what does a user actually encounter when they're actually doing this, right? And the only way to understand that is to talk to the actual user. So do usability studies. I think they're great. I think they provide a lot of insight beyond what people often will think they will get out of it. So know thy code, know the ARIA, understand how you can, from a technical perspective, support screen reader users, but also don't leave out the user. Users are your best resource for understanding whether something is working or not.
Great, thanks for that, Steve.
Sure.
Got another couple of questions here. Are you going to attend the ACB or NFB conventions next month?
I'm not sure. I would like to, if at all possible. I was spoiled a couple years ago. ACB was here in Minneapolis, and that was really awesome. This year it's not, so I'm not really sure. If anyone wants to connect at one of those conventions, definitely reach out. We can give you contact info for that, but we would be glad to let people know if I'm able to attend those or USBLN or any of the other conference type conventions. I'm not attending M-Enabling, unfortunately.
Okay. And it looks like this will be our last one with a couple minutes left. What are your top sites for references when it comes to screen readers?
Well, I would be remiss in not mentioning my favorite, DQUniversity.com, and I don't just say that because I'm here at DQ, but because it really is an amazing resource. There's lots of free information on there, free resources, as well as the paid content, which is frankly very reasonable for the amount of content you get in those packages. I love that there are working examples. There is lots of other resources available as well, many prominent blogs that are out there. Um, if you are an iOS person, pauljadam.com. Paul Adam is uh, a great iOS guy from Austin, and he has made publicly available a lot of patterns and such dealing with iOS, and his blog has become a fantastic resource over the years. So pauljadam.com is his thing, and off the top of my head, um, that's what comes immediately to mind, but I have tons of lists and resources, and there are lists of lists. There's lots of information out there depending on what your area of interest is.
Yeah, and we can send those out in a follow-up email if you think of any after this webinar, Steve.
Sure.
So with that, it looks like, this went by really fast. It was just a quick half an hour session. But we just want to thank everybody for hopping on. We hope you had the chance to get any outstanding questions that you had answered. And I just want to thank Steve for taking the time to hop on this follow-up session.
Oh, wait, right here,
Yeah.
Laura, is resources. We had a slide for this.
Yes.
So this might be some as well that we can email. There's a lot of stuff here. These are more screen reader centric, but would be useful. So yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thanks for that reminder. So again, email us if you have any questions. We'll make sure to get those answered. And thanks again for hopping on this quick follow-up webinar. We'll talk soon.
Great. Well, thanks very much again, everyone. I really, really appreciate the participation, the questions, and all of the interest around the topic.